So today is day 311 of the October 7th war and the Hamas hostage crisis. Hamas abuses children in captivity. Shrapnel, untreated for so long it could no longer be surgically removed. Diseases including typhus, spotted fever, skin infection, children covered in insect bites, extremely severe infestations of head lice, weight loss, muscle damage, young children with severe psychological trauma. All this is what doctors say 26 women and children taken from Israel on October 7th have experienced in Hamas's terror dungeons. The doctors published their findings in the pediatric medical journal Acta Pediatricia. That is what Hamas child abusers did to 26 women and children for months. And it's how they've been abusing remaining hostages from Israel for over 10 months now since October 7th. Hamas is still abusing children. Ariel Bibas just marked his 5th birthday in Hamas captivity. And his younger brother, Kfir, spent his 1st birthday with Hamas. Kfir Bibas has spent more of his short life a hostage of Hamas than he spent it ever free. The war that Hamas declared on October 7th cannot end with Hamas child abusers still in power. It cannot end with innocent children, their parents and grandparents being held hostage by Hamas. We must state loudly the ongoing call for the 3 Ds. Destroy Hamas, demilitarize the Gaza Strip, and de-radicalize Gazan society. The war cannot end with Hamas able to carry out another October 7th, as Hamas has repeatedly promised they will do again and again. And the hostages must be freed from the Hamas abusers now. From all corners and without trepidation, the world must demand their immediate release. So this is a call to you watching now. Tell your leaders to tell Hamas and its backers, Qatar, Turkey, and Iran, to let them go now. Now, in that vein, it is encouraging to see that today's joint statement from the leaders of the UK, France, and Germany. They're endorsing the US call for negotiations in order to get a release of hostages. Because Hamas is again refusing to release our hostages. Hamas is not only refusing to negotiate in good faith, Hamas is actually refusing to negotiate at all. The world needs to demand Hamas release the hostages immediately and unconditionally. It shouldn't be begging murderers to come to the table. Hamas's leader, Sinwar, from deep within his bunker hiding place, says he has Israel right where he wants it. He's happy to keep fighting to the last drop of Gazan blood, sacrificing his own people for his ideological cause, while keeping baby Kfir close at hand as an insurance policy to protect him even further. And it's crucial that our allies continue to send a message to the Hamas murderers and child abductors, and to their Iranian benefactors. This ends with hostages out today, and no Hamas able to take hostages out tomorrow. UK Prime Minister Starmer, President Macron, and Chancellor Scholz sent another message to Tehran, this time directly, stating, don't. Don't dare attack Israel. Don't dare send your proxy armies to attack Israel from Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, or Yemen. The diplomatic effort to contain Tehran's tyrannical caliphate comes alongside military preparation to defend the people of Israel from the Iranian regime's threat to murder them. And right now, the latest Israeli intelligence indicates that the Islamic Republic of Iran is still planning on launching its attack imminently. Our defense minister just shared that estimate with the US Secretary of Defense, as reported by Axios. And the US has positioned significant military assets, ships, jets, and other systems in order to protect against the Iranian regime's very serious military threats. To be clear here, Israel doesn't want war with Iran. But if Iran doesn't stand down, Israel and its allies will do whatever is needed to stop the Iranian regime from attacking. All right, and now just before I take questions, I'll ask again if you can please like and subscribe. It really helps to make a difference to the platform. We're seeing amazing growth so far from our community, but we only want to keep growing further to help get our message out. All right, with all this being said, I'll now take some questions from our audience watching live on social media, and please continue to input questions.
Our first question comes from Johan on Instagram Live. What is the explanation for how Hamas still holds hostages, and what justification is there in international law?
Johan, there is no justification, let's be clear, in international law for the taking and holding of hostages. These are not prisoners of war here. We are talking about innocents, children, infants, as I stated, about the Bibas brothers, who were taken captive on October 7th, going against all rules of law, morality, and any sort of faith, whether it be good, bad, or otherwise, that can be reasonably accepted. The reason that Hamas continues to hold hostages is because those of Sinwar and his ilk continue to use them as human shields and mechanisms as leverage and protection in their heinous war against Israel that they started on October 7th. This is so important that we rectify, that we get the hostages back home, and that is the key message that I want people to be able to take away from today's briefing and probably from many briefings still to come until we get that change in the status quo on the ground. There's no legal justification for this sort of action. There is no legal justification for the abuse of children. That is never justified under any form of law, whether it be international, whether it be religious, no matter what your source of law is, never has it been acceptable to abuse, harm, murder, rape, kill, whatever it may be, children and innocents anywhere. And this is exactly what we've seen from the terror army of Hamas, and is exactly the reason why Israel cannot stand to keep these terrorists alive and functioning on their doorstep, and why we are seeing the actions happen in Gaza as they are right now. This is on the heads of Hamas, of Sinwar, and his other fellow leadership, and is why it is the onus is on them and the responsibility is on them to rectify this by returning the hostages now.
Our next question comes from Malcolm. How do we de-radicalize people in Gaza who have spent the past 20 years indoctrinated by Hamas?
Malcolm, well, thank you for that critical question, because that really is the crux of what we need to deal with here. Obviously, in the short term, the imminent goal and resolve here is returning the hostages, ending this war, getting Hamas dismantled, but you will be left with a population in Gaza of over 2 million that have faced now close to 2 decades of Hamas radicalization and will need to be de-radicalized. And that can happen at a number of different levels. Key parts that we can see taking into place there are actions against those who help to provide education and support to the community there in Gaza. Humanitarian organizations, UNRWA, and other organizations out there who help to provide the key educational materials, and ensuring that those educational materials are properly vetted, that they do not promote radicalization, that they do not promote notions of jihad or of war or of radicalization against Israel or the Jewish people, and that they help to bring the population back to a sense of normalcy. Likewise, helping to ensure that there is a civilian-run, demilitarized government operating within the Gaza Strip, unlike Hamas has done so for the past 17 years, that has held the Gazan population in check through tyrannical authoritarian rule, to actually get to a state where you can have something resembling free, fair, liberal, perhaps even liberal democracy in the future in the Gaza Strip. There is so much potentiality there. There is so much scope for development, but it needs to come on the basis of a removal of Hamas, a return of the hostages, and, as we said, an all-purpose, all-encompassing de-radicalization with the help and goodwill of the international community to work alongside them. That really is a key and critical question. So, Malcolm, I'll say again, thank you so much for that. That is the sort of way we need to be thinking about the approaches to de-radicalization in the future in Gaza, because over the long term, that is the only way we will really reach any sense of normalcy, of peace, of security here in Israel and in the Middle East as a whole.
Our next question comes from Instagram Live. Is there any intelligence to confirm that the hostages are still alive?
Unfortunately, not really at the moment. There isn't. No, Israel is not entirely sure of the state of any particular hostages. Certainly, there are some that are understood to no longer be living. But as for the remaining, it is not 100% clear what status they are in at the moment. I mean, as it stands right now, if we understood the status, as we saw during the miraculous rescue of 4 hostages just a few months ago, Israel would be going in with the best capabilities they can to try and rescue these hostages and bring them back alive and safe. But as it stands right now, we do not really have clear answers to that question. And a key part of that is an important fact that we must remember, and something that you can speak about going forward, is the Red Cross has at no point been able to access the hostages taken on October 7th, to actually verify their condition, to verify that they are there, what state they're in, are they being treated humanely or fairly. The only accounts we have are from those rescued hostages and returned hostages that we have seen back from the Gaza Strip, who have been able to give some statements about the state of various other hostages that were being held in or around the same areas as they were at various points in time. But obviously, that intelligence goes out of date and dates very quickly. So as it stands right now, frankly, there is no publicly known information about the state of any particular hostages. But I can tell you who do know, and that is the leadership of Hamas, who are in charge and holding these hostages still. And again, to return back to that key point, the onus is on them to ensure that those hostages are returned in, unfortunately, whatever state they may be in now. But this must end now, and we must get that information clearly, succinctly, and without doubt by returning the hostages back to Israel so we can move forward with our lives after October 7th.
Our next question comes from Shiza on Instagram Live. How do we get the Australian government and other governments around the world to understand the threat and risk of radicalisation against democracy?
Well, there is one clear message that we can all do right here. We have a community thousands strong, tens of thousands strong, possibly hundreds of thousands and more, but here on this platform, that is exactly what we're trying to do, and get this community to rally together in order to go out to speak to your elected leaders. Most of you who are listening now live in democracies or have elected leaders or leadership that you are able to speak to. Write letters, make phone calls, go to public meetings, be the ones to stand up and speak out for Israel, to speak out for the hostages, to speak out against Hamas and their tyrannical rule, their terrorist army rule, and to speak out against all those who would fight against fair liberalism, democratic principles and values, and to go out into your communities and spread that message around the world. We, supporters of Israel of all shapes, sizes and ilks, really have a power when we work together at that grassroots level to help fight for change. And I think that is the real key message of what we do here at the Israeli Citizen Spokespersons Office. That's why we get up here every day to give these briefings, because we want to arm you with the information that you need to be able to go out and speak to your elected officials. And that's how we get governments from Australia, from the UK, Canada, France, Germany, the United States, wherever you may be in the world, India, it doesn't matter. Wherever you are, go out and speak to your elected leaders and rally for change, push for a different attitude, and get them to understand that the inhuman actions of the like of the terrorist army of Hamas cannot be allowed to stand, cannot be justified under any measure, and that any weakness shown towards them and their ideas risks further the lives and lowers the likelihood of the return of our hostages to come back to us, so again we can try and move forward with some semblance of closure and development from the situation we find ourselves now in this unbearable status quo.
Our next question comes from Madry. There's been talk about trying to overwhelm the Iron Dome. Is this actually possible, and what should we prepare for on Tisha B'Av?
Unfortunately, yes, it is possible to some degree. I mean, the Iron Dome, while an almost miraculous system of incredible technology that allows counter-striking rockets to take down and intercept rockets being fired into Israeli territory, is a fallible system. It is not 100%, and it does always present a risk that even 1% can get through, but 1% of 10,000 rockets, it is still a scary number to be fired, particularly when the rockets are fired indiscriminately or aim at civilian areas or civilian infrastructure or anywhere around where people may be hurt. Preparation should always be made at any time like this where there is a raised threat. We should always make sure to check out what the officers and government commands are and directives are coming from the government for anyone based inside Israel who may be at imminent threat in any way, shape or form. And of course, as always, being alert but not alarmed, taking sensible precautions within your home, with your family, lines of communication, travel, knowing where your nearest bomb shelter is, understanding the information you might need, having spare batteries, having spare food, whatever it is that you feel is necessary and is appropriate within your space, your community, and your situation. It is always a good idea to take these steps. That being said, while current intelligence points to the idea that an attack from Iran may be imminent in some shape or form, we don't know exactly when it'll occur. We don't know that it'll be on Tisha B'Av, whether it will or won't. We don't exactly know what the future holds as individuals, so we must always as ever, just be vigilant, be alert, make sure you're staying informed and checking appropriate sources for news and information. We'll obviously report through whatever we can as soon as we have that information. But for the time being, it's time to continue living your life. We must not let our lives be dictated by the Ayatollah or any others who might try and determine the way in which we live. We can take principles to be alert, but at the same time, it is very critical that we continue to live our lives here and enjoy. I myself am enjoying Tel Aviv and making sure I'm still getting out and making the most of things, because really we have lives to live and we're not going to let anyone, certainly not the Iranian regime, determine how we go about living those lives.
Our next question comes from Cleese on YouTube Live. When Hamas keeps declining to negotiate, why do people keep blaming the Israeli government? This is what goes on here in New York City at the weekly rallies for the hostages.
Please, it's a good question. As we've seen, Hamas has declined to negotiate in this supposedly last-ditch round of negotiations that were scheduled for this coming Thursday. It doesn't seem like Sinwar is in a mood to negotiate from inside his bunker while his people still suffer for his crimes. But, as it stands right now, you make a fair and compelling point that Israel does seem to continue to be blamed for not coming to the negotiating table, for not being good faith actors, when it is clearly Hamas that are not the ones coming to the table and trying to make a good faith deal and negotiation. And this is exactly what I said before. I won't repeat the entire point, but it is very clear that we need to continue putting pressure in these public spaces to make clear what the reality is on the ground. I think a lot of the sort of criticism that comes of Israel comes, frankly, not necessarily from pure malice, but also from ignorance. And there we can help change hearts and minds. Those with a malicious intent may be a lost cause in some instances, but those who are simply ignorant are the ones that we must go out and help to educate. Because it is important that we, as supporters of Israel, go out and inform people what is really going on in the world, what is really happening in Israel, the fact that Hamas are not coming to the table in any sense of good faith. If you could ever consider a terrorist army capable of coming in good faith, those who abuse children coming in good faith. But, we're not even talking about partners for peace here. We're simply talking about those who will negotiate on brass tacks a key deal to try and reach a ceasefire and a return of the hostages to Israel. But they are unwilling to give up power. They are unwilling to give up their own forms of control, what little they have left, for the sake of their own people, for the sake of the children that they hold hostage, for the sake of Israel, and for any sense of wider peace. They started October 7th, and they're living with the consequences because it serves their interests. And we must not let the world forget about that. And that is our imperative, each and every one of us, to go out and spread that message to help combat this misinformation and ignorance.
Our last question for today comes from Akiva. Please tell us more about the Israeli Citizen Spokesdog. We love it. Whose dog is it, and why now?
When it comes to Simka, the Israeli Citizen Spokesdog, who is barking up for Israel at every opportunity that he gets, I don't like to think of ownership in terms of any one individual. Simka belongs to the entire community. He belongs to the entire Israeli Citizen Spokespersons community, all you citizen spokespeople out there. He is simply a mechanism through which you can all help to understand a greater message and a greater context. And he really brings a different perspective, whether it be his lower angle to the ground, whether it be his hunt on the scent of good information and for the scent for truth, whether it be him barking up for Israel, whatever actions he may take. I think Simka really represents each and every one of us, and will continue to do so no matter what happens here in Israel, no matter what happens in the days, weeks, months ahead. He'll continue to bark up for Israel, and I suggest that you all bark up for Israel too. Really, so, when it comes to Simka, he's definitely a dog of all the people. And I guess that's how he's going to stay for the foreseeable future. All right, well, on that note, that is all we have time for today. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to watch and view this daily briefing. We'll try and pass on important, key, and clear information. And I'll just say one last time, if you can please like, subscribe, share, heart on whatever platform you're on. It really helps. You watching is critical, but you really helping us to convey out that message is so incredibly valuable. And of course, we'll be back at the same time tomorrow, so make sure you check us out there. I've been Westropp-Evans. Thanks for watching. Clear information. And I'll just say one last